introduce my very first guest this hour. His name is Timothy Oriedo, and he's the founder, CEO of Analytics Lab and an executive coach at the Strathmore Business School. Karibu sana to the show.
Thank you, Joyce.
Really good to have you here.
Yeah.
And with him, we want to talk about strategies to cope with imposter syndrome. I'm sure many of you have heard about it, and many people think it's fiction. But, you know, what is imposter syndrome? Well, here's a bit of some backstory. Did you know that an estimated 70% of people experience these imposter feelings at some point in their lives? And what does that mean? It means, have you ever been in a place where you feel, hey, Maze, I just don't belong here? Like your friends or your colleagues are gonna discover that you're a fraud and that you don't deserve your job or even your accomplishments. There's maybe you've gotten an opportunity someplace and you beyond being excited about it, you're actually more overwhelmed at, you know, your role and what is expected of you at that point. That's exactly what we want to talk about. It's very common. I've faced that before, very recently too. But we want to talk about the strategies to cope with that. And so, Timothy, you know, as we talk about this, and you're, you know, an executive coach at the business school. I imagine over there you can really see it really come to fruition, because these are people already perhaps managing organizations and institutions. How common is this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, and maybe just to shed more light on the driving force towards that. So you have a little bit of contribution from the society itself, and largely driven by the desire to achieve. Yeah, so you find many individuals trying to strive towards excellence, irrespective of the ability to achieve that. There is also a second driver, which is driven by the lack of talented or lack of skilled people in a given niche segment of skills. So for instance, at my lab, we work a lot with data scientists. Where we are as a country right now, we don't have many training institutions preparing these data scientists into the market. So you will receive a CV claiming one thing. When you, the gentleman will perform very well in the interview. When you give them the assignment, it's a complete departure from what they'd promised to do. And we see a lot of these scenarios continuing to evolve. And more or less in the academic space again, I think more and more of those cases will continue to come up, especially in this area of you know, the volatile business environment, and most careers trying to change faster than we had anticipated.
Yeah. So do you agree, again, back to the question of how common is it, do you agree with this statistic that 70% of people experience this? Or what have you seen?
Yeah, okay, I may not have a view of the specific number in terms of the data, but it is like really common.
Quite a number.
Yeah, there's quite a number. More or less even from just what experiences you have with your friends. You can look around and you can tell the advent of social media, and I think the recent buzz you saw going around on social media, that things are different on the ground. It just shows you where there's a departure from the real, to the, you know, what we sort of call the impost. Yeah.
So, I mean, you've talked about that a lot of it can also be external factors that are contributing to this imposter syndrome. How much of it, though, is internal? Is there anything sort of in our own psychology, our own insecurities that contribute to that?
Yeah, of course. There, and I think that's why I admire what we do at Strathmore, because we build a lot of ethics and, you know, leadership built from an ethical perspective. So a lot of this actually starts from the individual himself, you know, self-gratification. We call it Me Too. You know, you have seen your friends achieving, there's pressure from your family, there is pressure from your peers, your social circle. And I think some of these pressures are actually driving as individuals to push ourselves to realms that we've not really prepared ourselves for. And then the manifestation of this is the one now what you see in career. Going to the length of faking degree certificates, going to the length of, you know, extremes of even coming up with plagiarizing content that's not yours.
Yeah.
Just to make trying to create a self-belief system that yes, you're able to do what you look like you can do. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I want us to do a little exercise with our audience members here. I'm going to ask you guys some questions, sort of like a mini quiz. And you guys can, just to assess if you actually have imposter syndrome, or if maybe you've never known what it is. And today is when we are telling you it's imposter syndrome. But let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like, one, your company made a mistake hiring you? Okay, if that's, you can write there in the comments or in the SMS, number 1, yes or no, number 2, yes or no, so I can follow your answers there. But have you ever felt like your company made a mistake hiring you? Number 2, that you feel that your incompetence is going to be found out and that you're going to be fired. Or number 3, that everyone is just humoring you because they're being too nice to tell you the truth about you. Okay, and actually a fourth question there, do you feel that your success is a product of pure coincidence? If you're answering yes to these questions, you might you might find that you're suffering from imposter syndrome. So when people ask questions like these, if we're to be very honest with ourselves and say, I admit that I have an incompetence and I'm worried that it's going to be found out, or that I myself feel that my success is a product of pure coincidence, it means that I cannot stand behind my own work, my own effort. So it almost implies that there's a measure of imposter syndrome that is actually true. That is not possibly all made up in our minds. If some of, to some degree, that if these are the things that we're feeling, then is it at all possible that part of it is actually true?
Okay, there is that conviction, and that I think becomes the first step towards acceptance, with your recognition that you don't have what it takes to the task that you've been given, but you are drawn to that fact that at the end of the month you need to have that paycheck to get the bills. So you might be feeling shy to approach your supervisor and tell them, feel one or two things about this task that I've been given.
That pressure is intense to perform.
The pressure is intense. And I think, look at it this way, we even have people outsourcing their jobs online nowadays. So in the tech world, there are platforms where you go, you bid a job for someone to develop for you a software code. So you find like a lot of guys who might be in the technical side, which requires a lot of hands-on skills, even have a place where they can hide.
And so how do we overcome this then? Because clearly this is something that can paralyze one's growth at work. It can really inhibit your potential and keep you back from giving the value that your company is expecting you to give.
So I think the first thing that I see is insulating the organization from such happening would be to have a strong policy of recruitment, just having clear checks and balances, having verification in place, perhaps re-engineer the way they do the interviews, having more case experiential kind of interviews rather than pen and paper. And I think perhaps just rejigging the whole element of ethics around doing recruitment, because you find a lot of referrals, which again, sorry to say, but it could be based on nepotism. So people wanting to refer their friends, their relatives to positions which they're not really suitable for. And from a personal perspective, and then if you find yourself in that situation, at least in the bare minimum, try to notify your supervisor. And you might you might make an arrangement, maybe first to be transferred to the right department, or secondly, to be able to be given an opportunity to learn that skill that you had perceived to have at the first place. Because there are some jobs which are very sensitive. If you have that sort of quirk mentality and exposure in your day-to-day work, you're putting the lives of many at risk.
Right. And and I totally agree. So if you're a doctor or a nurse, those type of careers, like, you certainly should not be, you need to be there and be convinced that you're supposed to be there. But we have to keep in mind, unemployment is such a huge issue in this country. There's a lot of young people looking for opportunities, and oftentimes we're told, fake it till you make it, right? Like, act the part, visualize it, dress up for it, and eventually, you'll find yourself
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there. But it
yeah,
sounds like you're saying, as a recruiter, for you,
yeah,
you're like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I think if you watch the series Suits,
Yes.
and many youth would like to have such a kind of occurrences which are almost surreal. You might
Yeah.
not really have a situation where you have you excel, you go through this, and even locally we've seen someone being like a surgeon performing surgery yet he's not qualified.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think the more we glamorize such kind of incidences, the more and more we'll see our youth gravitating towards that. But I think what we need to appreciate is the resilience and the grit that goes into preparation when you and separating you from the rest of the pack. And that's why we have academic institutions, for instance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So making sure that you're able to build a brand for yourself. Yeah. First by having a certification or
Okay.
being qualified in that area.
Okay.
And then secondly, being able to have respect and get respect from your peers, yeah, based on the work that comes out of your hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it boils down to actually doing, the thing that you say you can, and being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
If you don't know, seek to learn. Find a new certification. Thank you so much for joining us here, Timothy. It's been great talking to you.
Thank you too.
And we appreciate your time. Once again, he's the founder and CEO of Analytics Lab and an executive coach at Strathmore Business School. We've been talking about the imposter syndrome and how to cope with it. But coming up next, we need to get ready for our next guest. We're going to be talking about pushing our limits. And my next guest will be here shortly. Stay tuned. This is Full Circle with Joyce.